Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And I am so excited today because I'm speaking with one of my fellow C-Suite Network members. I always love that because they have so much expertise and so much knowledge, and this person is just super, super nice. So please join me in welcoming Sonia Jeantet to our program today. Welcome, Sonia. How are you?
Thank you so much, Deb. I am doing great. I'm in Southern California and
Woo.
The weather is gorgeous today.
Perfect.
So it's a great day.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, we have warm weather here today, but we also have high humidity. So bleh.
But no humidity here.
I know. Well, let me tell people a little bit about you, and then we will dive into this because this is going to be such a fascinating discussion. So Sonia Jeantet is the founder of SEMA Executive Development, a coaching and consulting firm in Southern California. She is also known in executive circles as the Leadership Suite Whisperer. Sonia has been an international master personal and executive coach for 25 years, primarily with Fortune 500 companies, and Fortune 100 sales executive with Hewlett-Packard and Digital Equipment Corporation, better known as DEC, right? I don't even know if it still exists. She has coached more than 400 senior executives to grow and sustain profitable results. She is also the author of The Integrative Leader, which shares the model that engages cognitive diversity. So again, Sonia, welcome.
Thank you so much, Deb. I really appreciate it. And you pronounced everything correctly, including SEMA.
I love it. Well, I'm going to ask you where the name came from pretty soon.
Okay.
But yeah, first of all, tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are today, because I think people are very interested in that.
Mm-hmm. So, one of the things that I find interesting in people that, design their careers and evolve their careers is that at some point in time early in their life, they had like a seed about the potentially that would be what they would do. So I'm going to take you all the way back to when I was 15 years old,
Cool.
sitting at the dinner table with my dad. And he would always ask us like, so what do you want to do when you grow up? What do you do when you grow up? And I remember answering, I want to help a lot of people. I want to read a lot of books.
Okay.
And I want to make a lot of money. At the time he says, I don't think there's a career like that. But
those seem like good goals.
but I guess what the seed for me to eventually want to be in a role in which I would be working with people, being able to contribute solid information that would help them succeed, and then also obviously be appropriately compensated for my effort. That would be the case. So I actually went to undergraduate for business in Denver.
Yay!
And my dad had his own business in Colombia. He was the automotive parts business.
Okay.
So basically, he was a salesperson to all the many Moe and Jacks of the country. And initially, we thought that I'd be going into that business. And I went back home and worked for him between Denver and then when I went to graduate school. And we realized that it was not for me, but I liked business just because it was just, I didn't have a passion for cars.
Well, being a female, did that make it a little bit of a challenge also?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, but particularly that was the other, to be very candid, Deb, I'm glad that you brought that up. When I would start working with some of my father's clients, they would say, I can't get over, you're Nikki's girl, and it was always like, I wanted to be treated like an adult.
Right.
Like,
and not Nikki's girl.
Exactly.
And girl was the
Nikki's
very
girl.
telling.
Exactly. So basically, we agreed that probably the best thing for me would be to go back at my graduate degree and then do it internationally, potentially because I spoke a couple of languages,
Right.
to be able to do so. So I went to Thunderbird in Arizona.
Mhm.
And as a result of that, ended up being hired by American Express
Ah.
in New York City,
Mhm.
which was about going overseas. I was
Mhm.
supposed to be going through a training program
Mhm.
that would basically help, open operating centers. And at that time, they were going to be opening one in Argentina, and they were going to
Ah.
be opening one in Brazil.
Mhm. Oh, and your Spanish background just
Yeah.
was perfect for that.
Exactly. And then what ended up happening was about 3/4 through the program, the company decided to delay opening up
Mhm.
centers. And the gentleman who had hired me actually brought me to his office and sat me down and said, and this would be like a pattern in my career. I
Mhm.
would observe this. He sat me down and he said, Sonia, I got some good news and some bad news. I was like, so because I was going through this program, I just figured
Right.
he'd gotten some feedback that I
Mhm.
wasn't doing things correctly, and
Mhm.
he wanted to sort of give me
Mhm.
the give, give me the lowdown kind of thing.
Mhm.
Basically said, well, Sonia, they're not going to open operating centers
Oh.
overseas right now.
Mhm.
And because of that, I'm actually going to be leaving. And I'm
Mhm.
actually going to be leaving and start and heading up a company called MasterCard. That
Mhm.
time MasterCard didn't exist. And he
Mhm.
said, and I'd love for you to come along with me.
Ah.
And what was ironic at the time was that I had fallen in love with somebody from Thunderbird, and he
Mhm.
was a California
Mm.
gentleman.
Mhm.
And we kept debating about, like, should we get engaged?
Mhm. Mhm. Long
He's,
distance.
yeah, well,
Mhm.
he'd actually looked up at that time. He was like, "Do you know it's $9 a minute?" It seemed
Mhm.
like, oh my God.
I
And so,
know. Mhm.
so I basically took the opportunity and I said, George, thank you so much for thinking of me.
Mhm.
Let me explain my personal
Right.
situation. And he said, okay. He said, well, we don't have operating centers in California.
Mhm.
I can give you this and this route kind of
Mhm.
thing. And so it became a thing where it's like many times in my career, I would
Mhm.
be looking at a blank page
Mhm.
and it would be like, so what is it that I need to do now?
Mhm. Mhm.
So as a result of that, I ended up coming out here to California
Mhm.
and with the blank page, started looking through, at that time it was the newspapers,
Mhm.
and found out that there was this career in technology that was beginning to grow.
Mhm.
And there was this one company that had been started by ex-IBMers
Mhm.
that were looking for people that didn't have necessarily an engineering degree,
Okay.
but had an MBA.
Ah.
And that way they felt that they could train those people to
Mhm.
actually become, very good salespeople
Mhm.
and executives in that industry. So I got started in sales and being able to interact with many
Mhm.
people and understand how people thought,
Mhm.
understand what was going on for them through that career.
Mhm.
And so I spent 16 years as
Mhm.
an executive in high tech
Mhm.
and ended up getting to a point in my career where, at that time, the pace and the growth in the business was very fast.
Oh,
And
right.
people
Mhm.
were going from like hardware to
Mhm.
software to
Mhm.
consulting. So the next step for me would have been to go into consulting, just like so many of my peers were
Mhm.
doing. And I just didn't see myself there.
Mhm.
And so I thought, what am I going to do? I'm still
Mhm.
young. I've got lots of stuff in front of me. And somebody suggested, why don't you put together a survey and ask the people that know you best what
Huh.
would be the ideal career for you?
Okay.
And
Mhm.
I was like, are you nuts? Now, this is before the Survey Monkey. So I
Right.
actually
Yeah,
put
you had
together
to do paper and pen and Mhm.
so I sent it out to 12
Mhm.
people,
Mhm.
for people that knew me personally,
Mhm.
for people that I had been clients of mine, and then for people that I had worked for at some point.
Okay.
And when they came back with the answers, to be really candid with you, I was like, oh my God, they're asking me to go into HR
Mhm.
because they kept talking
And
about
you were
how,
like, that just doesn't appeal. Mhm. Mhm.
well, because they were like, you really understand people well, you
Mhm.
build together strong teams,
Okay.
you are constantly curious
Mhm.
about what's going on for
Mhm.
people, so we see you. And I was like, okay, so basically, when I get into that kind of a dilemma, I
Mhm.
sort of try to take my mind off of it.
Mhm.
I happen to really love art.
Mhm.
And there was a particular art gallery
Mhm.
that was having a showing
Mhm.
right after I had looked at my
Mhm.
results. And I decided to go there just to get my mind off
Mhm.
of it. And as the universe is, it works in mysterious ways.
Mhm.
I was standing there in front of a particular piece
Mhm.
of art, and this woman standing next to me, very professionally dressed, and she's asking me if I'm going to buy the piece, and I'm like,
Mhm.
no. And it led to a conversation. Turns
Mhm.
out that she was a therapist that had her own
Ah.
consulting
Uh-huh.
practice, and she knew a lot about a career called executive coaching that
Mhm.
I had never heard of.
Right.
And so when she asked me, what do you do? I just decided to say I was in transition. And she said, "Oh, you have a job?" I said, "Oh, I have a job.
hmm
I don't want
I
the
just don't
job."
like it right now.
And so when she looked at me, she said, "Well," so I said, "Hey, I had people answer questions
hmm
to see what recommendations they have for
hmm
me." And when I told her what it was, she looked at me, she goes, "Oh, you're an executive coach."
hmm
And I was like, "What is
Oh,
that?"
what's it?
She says, "Well, it's what people like me do when we want to work with high functioning individuals." She
Ah.
says, "But the problem that we tend to have is we haven't walked a mile in their moccasins." And
Mm.
so she said, "So when I go in there to help an executive,
hmm
they sometimes think I don't understand the world we
Right.
live."
Right.
She says, "But you have lived that. You
Yes, you've
actually
been that
run teams,
executive.
you run global
Hmm
teams, you've
hmm
been sitting on certain committees."
hmm
So she said, "You would have a lot of credibility." I said, "Well,
hmm
I come from a world in which you have to be qualified to do
hmm
anything like that." And I
Right.
said, "I'm just going to be candid with you. I'm not going to go become a therapist. I
hmm
don't think that's my career." And she said, "No, actually, there was at that time only two places in the country
hmm
that actually had a curriculum
hmm
where you could actually get certified as an executive coach." Now,
Ah.
it took a year.
hmm
You have to take all these different courses,
hmm
have to be supervised while you're doing it.
hmm
And as I started literally, sticking my toe in it while I still had my other job,
hmm
it was like every time I did it, I was like, I was put on this earth to do this.
Oh, I love it.
This is
hmm
where, I go back to
hmm
when I was 15 years old, and it was
Yeah.
like, I'm reading a lot of books, I can
hmm
help a lot of people,
hmm
and it looks like it has good earning potential. Because
hmm
actually, when you actually been in sales and managing teams,
hmm
you make a good income,
hmm
and it's sort of a way that we take score.
hmm
So anyway, I once I was able to realize that I was going to get the
hmm
certificate and everything like that, I did launch my own business,
hmm
and it's always scary because
hmm
although my father had been an entrepreneur, I had never been
Right.
an entrepreneur.
hmm
I had always worked for somebody else,
hmm
and I didn't have, if you will, a peer group with whom I could
hmm
relate. Now today there's
Right.
people that can help you in that kind of way, but I ended up, because I am a good networker, because
hmm
I like to speak to people,
hmm
I attended different luncheons.
hmm
And so within the first year, I ended up finding people that ended up becoming key contacts, either for
Ah.
the business that they
hmm
had, for the organizations that
hmm
they were going to be working with, where it literally gave me three clients that I would be on retainer with them
hmm
for like 10 to 15 years, which
Wow.
which when you have that, so in a
hmm
sense, I feel like that security blanket, my
hmm
bread and butter
hmm
kind of thing, and then I could expand from that.
Right.
And
You could do the smaller projects as
exactly,
you wanted to.
exactly,
hmm
exactly. So that's how I ended up, and like I tell you, the
hmm
25 years as an
hmm
executive coach have flown by.
hmm
Have flown by. And the funny and the ironic thing about it is there's people that I coached at the very beginning of my
hmm
career as an executive coach. Recently, this happened.
hmm
Somebody reached out, texted me on my phone and
hmm
said, "Is this still your phone, Sonia?" And I was like,
hmm
"Yeah, but I'm not sure who you are."
Yeah. hmm
And so when I ended up connecting, she said, "I don't know if you're still coaching, and I don't
hmm
know if you would be open to this, but I have a son,
Ah.
and he is potentially thinking about working with a coach.
hmm hmm
Would you consider having a chemistry meeting with him?" And I said,
Uh-huh.
"Oh, absolutely." And what she didn't tell me, and later on, and I would find out, is her son had actually gone to college and straight out of school, had founded his own company with somebody else.
Oh my.
They'd had it for 7 years, been
hmm
very successful,
hmm
and he now had taken himself out and wanted to start something new.
Okay.
So very rare that you
hmm
get to meet somebody who's
hmm
like in their early 30s,
hmm
already experienced success,
Right.
already identified
hmm
what passion is, how you really
hmm
go, achieve your goals,
hmm
and is now looking at you saying, "Well, what are the options in
hmm
front of you?" And it's just delightful.
Oh,
So
I bet.
I'm so grateful. I
hmm
love
hmm
what I do.
Yeah. I love it, and it's it's fun to hear about how you went on this career path before many others, like you said, they didn't even know what it was.
Mhm,
And so, and the fact that you then said, I'm going to continue this, which
mhm,
obviously meant that you were very successful at it.
mhm,
But yeah, I mean, that's the thing is so many people dibble dabble, and especially executives, right?
mhm,
They we don't have somebody in senior leadership who's there for many, many years. And I think we really see that with the millennials, right? They go
mhm,
here for a couple years to get this certain
mhm,
experience.
mhm,
Then they go to this company and get this certain experience. And I find that fascinating. I think that's very cool, because they're building such a knowledge base. And when we first started out, yeah, you started at a company and you stayed there until the day you retired.
Yeah.
And now it's, now you go all these different places, but it also means there's so much change that is always going on. You're never quite sure who's in charge, and all those various things. We were talking about that before the program, that yeah, with all those changes, it leads to so much uncertainty. And I think that's where a lot of times you do need someone to come in your role and say, okay, let's calm the situation.
Mhm. Let's take a look at, thank you so much, Deb. And by the way, something that you did mention
Mhm.
about the millennials being
Mhm.
able to hop to different
Mhm.
areas
Mhm.
is part of when I look at what I wrote about
Mhm.
being a cognitive diverse
Mhm.
leader.
Mhm.
I think that they have the potential for getting there faster
Right.
than those of us from other
Mhm.
generations
Mhm.
because they're willing to explore and put
Right.
themselves into
It's
different
second
environments.
nature to them.
Exactly. It's
Mhm.
actually like my joke is they were born with a disruptive gene.
Right. Mhm.
They came
Yeah.
in cable
Mhm.
ready and they're
Mhm.
ready to be disruptive. And
Mhm.
so that's extremely important.
Mhm.
I think the other part that I find interesting that so when I started working initially as an executive coach,
Mhm.
they didn't call it this, but basically it was like, oh, it's a fix-it coaching. This
Mm.
person has this problem and
Mhm.
they want
Yeah,
you to
you're
fix
going to come in and you're going to make it
and
all
and,
better.
and
Mhm.
yeah, and the thing that I was always and I always asked, I said, okay, I want to make sure that it isn't that
Mhm.
this person gets to get coached, and if it
Mhm.
doesn't work out, you're going to fire them because
Mhm.
that's not really an investment, and I don't want to
No.
be sitting
Mm-mm.
in a
Mhm.
bunch of courtrooms, and I don't want to have a
And to
huge
have that responsibility.
legal bill
Oh.
exactly
Mhm.
because then it's not fair to them
Mhm.
and they can draw the wrong
Mhm.
conclusions. So
Mhm.
very early on, I made it my business to be able to like reframe for the different leaders that were being
Mhm.
referred to me to think of it as an investment in creating high potential individuals,
Mhm.
high potential
Right.
team. So I think because I reframed it
Mhm.
and started putting myself on that
Mhm.
track, I began to notice the difference between the leaders that actually could have anything thrown at them.
Mhm.
Lemons and they'd make lemonade.
Mhm.
They'd be put into a brand new
Mhm.
situation. And that's when I began to realize they were doing things differently than
Mhm.
the other people I was working
Right.
with. And that became the seed. I began to notice it as early as 2007.
Mhm.
And then I started like, if you will,
Mhm.
putting together like my own little file of, so, this is what David
Mhm.
does, this is what Bob does, and this
Mhm.
is what so does. And so by the time I got to about 2013,
Mhm.
2014, and I started working with certain leaders,
Mhm.
I felt like I actually had an approach that I knew would prepare them for no matter what they were
Mhm.
going to be facing.
Right. Might
And
not
so,
be at that current company, but that was
exactly.
not a bad thing.
Exactly. And so what I noticed, just as what was interesting, is women seem to
Mhm.
be more receptive to what I was explaining to them
Mhm.
about
Mhm.
using your whole brain and all that.
Mhm.
I ended up finding out when I did my research is that women have an advantage. Our corpus callosum
Mhm.
is actually thicker.
Ah.
Therefore, it naturally creates more space for
Mhm.
us to have neural connections going back and
Okay.
forth.
Mhm.
The other thing that I noticed is of the women that I chose to work with in this capacity, as you said, at the
Mhm.
company that they were at, it may be not the right place.
Mhm.
Every single one of them, when they left the company that they were at, and they might have been at a vice president level,
Mhm.
they
Mhm.
might have even been at the vice president level, every single one of them went to the C-suite.
Mhm.
So I can,
Mhm.
proudly say that there's at least 10 women
Mhm.
that I know I provided quite a bit of
Mhm.
information. They did the work.
Right.
They're the
Mhm.
ones who delivered all the
Mhm.
goods the
Mhm.
company needed, who today are sitting in C-level roles,
Mhm.
and I know they're whole brain thinkers.
Oh,
So,
I love it. Right.
so that's
Right.
sort of like,
Mhm.
that's my
Mhm.
passion. That's my
Right.
passion.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
everybody doesn't have to get to the C-suite. It wasn't, and by the way,
Mhm.
one of the 10, when I'd originally started the coaching, I always say, do you have a vision for your career? Do you know
Right.
where you end
Mhm.
up? There was only one that had even thought of themselves in a C-level role.
Hmm.
All the other people, as they began to realize how
Mhm.
they were like really jamming and
Mhm.
understanding
Mhm.
things, said, I could probably do that job. I
Right.
could probably do that job.
Mhm. Right.
So it's just
Well,
nice. Yeah.
we as women, I think we have limited ourselves too much.
Yes.
And that's a whole different discussion, right? Because it is one of those things where, you know, yeah, we just think, ugh. But I think part of it is we think, oh, I don't want to do that. That's no,
I mean, the first time I remember when I started coaching in so I started moving into different industries. So first, obviously, you start in tech, and then I speak at different groups, and they would say, "Oh, have you ever worked in entertainment? Have you ever worked in banking?" So one of the companies I coached at was at Toyota, and I was at the time when I was there, it was the first time that they promoted a woman into the CFO role. And so
Ooh, a finance role.
so
Wow.
that was a really big deal.
Mhm.
And she actually spoke to a group of their leaders, and then it was something that got replayed for those of us who were coaches. And I remember listening to her name was Tracy, and I was listening to her, and she said, the first time I realized that I had really broken through a ceiling was I had gone back to Japan, to Tokyo, to a meeting, and the meeting, obviously, for that level was at the very top floor of this building. And she needed to go on a bio break, and there was no bathrooms for women on that floor.
Yep.
So she actually had to go to another floor. And it was like, that's how things were.
Right.
Today, it sounds like weird to people because
Well, but yeah, it's that is the way it was. And of course we've all heard the stories about, the NASA group where, the African American women had to go across campus because there weren't integrated bathrooms.
Exactly.
And I mean the scary thing here, folks, is that was not that long ago. And so, but yeah, I think women really are thinking, I can be in the C-suite. I can do that. Now, I think a lot of times they do choose not to because, for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But that's great if they were given that choice. Yes.
But it's a choice.
Yep. Yeah.
It's not a limitation. It's not, well, I'll be candid. I was in technology. I started at this small company called Four Phase, ended up going into Hewlett Packard.
Right.
The reason I went from Hewlett Packard to digital was, I'll be really candid with you. That person was my boss. We were looking at what would be my next possible role. He said, Sonia, you're not an electrical engineer.
Right.
Excuse me? I said, there's no electrical engineer design at that level. And he said, it doesn't matter. That's something that's here. So I thought, so in my mind, it was like, I'm going someplace where that's not going to be a restriction for me. Whether I ever get there or not, I just don't want that as a restriction for me.
Right.
And I think today we've come a long way.
Right. And the restrictions are funny because it has been things where it was a specific field like electrical engineering or, let's be honest, color, and certainly I think, they're like, oh, well, no, women can't do that. And then what we do is we prove them wrong, which is very good about that. But and we all know, and this is, something I've talked about on my program before, that the more diversity we have in companies, the better it is. I mean, it's just
decisions.
Because you're getting all the different inputs, right?
Exactly, because you're not in groupthink. Yeah, you're not in groupthink. Yes.
Right. Well, you mentioned something about whole brain, and I love this because you focus on integrative leadership. Correct. So define that for us.
Okay. So an integrative leader is someone that actually taps their whole brain potential for arriving at decisions and building their teams.
Right.
So when I say that, to just sort of make it very sort of summarize, the left brain is where most of Western civilization and business is very oriented.
Right. It's very business analytical.
Financial, analytical, engineering, how to get, so it's about the what and the how in terms of what we do. The right brain is very active and very there in the creative field.
Right.
Where I worked in entertainment for a long time as a coach. Basically, the people that were the suits, which were more the left brain, were the smaller group, and the people that were actually the creatives were the larger group. And what happens is if you go too far in one direction or the other, the possibility of potentially not making the right call based on what kind of information you have or what you understand is high.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I realized when I told you that I could see what was the potential, I
Mm-hmm.
realized that people that actually could go easily
Mm-hmm.
into topics that
Right.
address both of those
Mm-hmm.
areas, and then the whole
Mm-hmm.
brain had an advantage,
Mm-hmm.
and that advantage allowed them to do things, make the right call
Mm-hmm.
with less
Mm-hmm.
challenges and with greater success.
Mm-hmm.
I'll share a quick story
Mm-hmm.
about this. When I was coaching in the entertainment field, I was coaching a particular gentleman who was in business affairs,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
legal, and his boss was a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And after spending some time with her, I realized she was very cognitive diverse,
Mm-hmm.
and he wasn't. He was very left-brained. He
Mm-hmm.
was all about, very
Mm-hmm.
specific.
Mm-hmm.
And so we used to go, when I met with him, we'd go meet on the campus because
Mm-hmm.
he wanted to get out of his office. And so this one particular day, he's walking towards me and I see his face and I realize, oh my God, this man is very frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, is he frustrated about her?
He's in a stomping mode, right?
Yeah, he was, there was this
Mm-hmm.
intensity.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Right.
was like, hi. So
Mm-hmm.
I said, what happened? What's going on?
Mm-hmm.
So he and his team had been working on a global contract
Mm-hmm.
with a new content provider for them
Mm-hmm.
that had, if you will, a lot of things different than what they've done up until then.
Mm-hmm.
And in those days, because we weren't doing everything just
Mm-hmm.
online, what they used to do is when the contract was close to being signed, ready to
Mm-hmm.
be completed, they would take the conference room over and put all the different sections of the contract.
Mm-hmm.
So anybody who was related to that
Oh,
contract
okay. Mm-hmm.
could come in and take a look at it and then
Mm-hmm.
make any kind of recommendations. So why he was mad is that at lunch that particular day, his boss had walked in there
Mm-hmm.
within 15 minutes, had identified a particular area that was a potential vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, you know what made me so mad is that's the area that we all struggle the most with. And we spent a lot of time,
Mm-hmm.
Sonia, came up with what we thought was
Mm-hmm.
the best solution. And she identified where it was weak.
Ah.
And he said, and then you know what she did? I was like, no, what she
Mm-hmm.
did? He says, and then she gave us 3 different options
Ah.
so that we could actually
Mm-hmm.
solve.
Right. It wasn't just
And he
fix
said,
this or it won't work. It's
and he
here's some
said,
thoughts. Mm-hmm.
none of us went there.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, do you know why none of you went there?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, no. And I said, because you're not cognitive diverse.
Mm-hmm.
The kinds of solutions that she was coming up with
Mm-hmm.
have more of a right brain
Mm-hmm.
orientation,
Right.
which provides a lot of context.
Mm-hmm.
So without giving you all the
Mm-hmm.
details, it had a lot to do with the specific markets and the
Mm-hmm.
specific focus of the
Mm-hmm.
particular audience that they would have in those
Mm-hmm.
areas. And he said,
She saw the bigger picture.
and literally, so
Okay.
this was shocking to me. He looked at me and goes,
Mm-hmm.
can you teach me how to become cognitive diverse? And I said,
Well,
we can work on that.
Mhm. Right, right.
We can make that a goal.
Right.
But I guess what I'll say to you is that's the advantage.
Mhm.
In so that specific
Mhm.
situation on that specific day
Mhm.
probably saved this organization millions of dollars
Mhm.
and allowed them to be able to meet the deadline
Right.
in a way that they were very
Mhm.
confident
Mhm.
and they knew the chairman and everybody else
Mhm.
was going to be happy with it.
Right.
So when why for me it's a passion in an area
Mhm.
that I spend quite a bit of time with is I want people to be able to optimize their returns
Mhm.
and optimize their time so
Mhm.
that when they're actually spending time solving problems,
Mhm.
they're enjoying it.
Right.
They're working with, new
Mhm.
ideas and new approaches. It makes all the difference in the world. It also creates a different work environment.
Mhm.
We're living
Right.
in very stressful times.
Mhm. Mhm.
And my concern, in all honesty, when I finally decided to write the book, which turned out to be right when COVID happened,
Mhm.
was I could see how AI was evolving.
Mhm.
And AI is phenomenal for left brain,
Mhm.
for
Oh
left,
yeah,
left
because
brain
it can be
activity.
very analytical and
Exactly. And even on the right brain, I
Mhm.
mean, I remember seeing I was doing a lot of the research at the time,
Mhm.
and they at that time had robots. What they were showing
Mhm.
in research was that there were robots in hospitals
Mhm.
who were actually going up to children that were very
Mhm.
ill, and if you will, sort of engaging them
Mhm.
in having fun, because
Mhm.
potentially they might not have any friends, they might not have anybody that they can
Right.
connect to,
Mhm.
and the human need and experience for connection is high.
Mhm. Mhm.
So when I think about the work environment that people are going to be working in right now, they need to be able to be above
Mm-hmm.
what AI offers
Right.
in order for them to feel
Mm-hmm.
comfortable
Mm-hmm.
that they have a career,
Mm-hmm.
for the organization to
Mm-hmm.
be able to develop. So
Right.
I think of it as having an elite level of pattern
Mm-hmm.
recognition
Mm-hmm.
that's based on your experience and your
Mm-hmm.
wisdom. And
Right.
so that's my passion. It's
Mm-hmm.
like it's going to be
Mm-hmm.
needed.
I love it. And the people who think we're going to restrict AI or that it's going away, no, no. And for anybody who is, hello, Siri has been doing this for years, right? Um, but yeah, it is just another tool. People objected to, the when we in put Model A's were put together on, in pieces and things like that. Um, but yeah, it's all in how you adapt to it. But as you were talking about this, one of the things I was thinking about is that we do tend to think of left brain as being more masculine
Mhm.
and right brain as being more feminine. And of course, blending those is where we have the best. We've all had those left brain bosses, and and because they do tend to be more management type of positions, right?
Right.
And I remember when I had a CEO one time and we were having to lay people off. I mean, this was not a
Yeah.
good situation, and he could not put himself into the place of emotionally having empathy for these folks.
Mhm.
Now, I think part of that was he did that deliberately. He didn't want to think about I'm ruining these people's lives, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
But it also made him come across as being very cold and
Yeah.
unfeeling.
Yeah.
And now if he had gotten up there in front of everybody and cried, that wouldn't have gone over well either. So, but it's that combination of
Mhm.
being able to say, okay, we're going to make this decision, and here are the results, and knowing that all of those other things that go into it. And so I
Mhm.
love this. This concept is just it's so fascinating to me.
Something else to talk about when it comes to the left brain, and
Mm-hmm.
again, there's been quite a bit of studies behind
Mm-hmm.
this. You are correct.
Mm-hmm.
It is something that is it's not going to tap the emotional intelligent
Mm-hmm.
quotient very often. And what you find with people that are very left brain and can
Mm-hmm.
become highly obsessive, so their
Mm-hmm.
solution for a lot of stress is to just work harder,
Right.
the
Mm-hmm.
grindstone,
Mm-hmm.
and be more making lists and all
Mm-hmm.
of that. They have a higher incidence of depression,
Right. And heart
anger,
attacks and
and
all of those.
anger.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so things that actually do not contribute to the business.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I will tell you that I was lucky enough to, if
Mm-hmm.
you will, see and observe was I've been working with this one engineering firm here
Mm-hmm.
locally for about 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd seen them actually merge with another engineering
Mm-hmm.
firm. And so the gentleman who ended up, because they'd all been partners
Mm-hmm.
and nobody wanted to be the CEO, nobody
Mm-hmm.
wanted to be the president. I'm like, okay, you guys are going to have to make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
So let's figure out who's the
Mm-hmm.
best person for that role, because
Right.
that's the person who's going to be the face.
Mm-hmm.
That's the person who's going to actually face all the different
Mm-hmm.
employees as you guys keep growing into
Mm-hmm.
different areas. So we finally decided on this one particular individual.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the reason for me was because he was the one that in any meeting, when we were going through and quote unquote
Mm-hmm.
making decisions, he would say, well, what else could this mean? And I thought, okay,
Ah.
he's got a little bit more of that,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So long story short, now we're coming up to a period of time when there was a slowdown in the business,
Mm-hmm.
and correct, they needed to do
Mm-hmm.
layoffs. And so we were able to sit down and talk about how they were going to do it, what
Mm-hmm.
was fair, what was right, and then who was going to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
And he got up and basically the first thing that he shared with everybody was that they were obviously going to have to do this. And he talked about how much of a cut the
Mm-hmm.
people at the very top were going to take.
Ah.
So he basically made it so
Mm-hmm.
that anybody that was in a senior level
Mm-hmm.
got a 25% cut.
Ah. So
And
then
then
everybody below went, okay,
so
they
when
felt
so when
this
he
too.
started going down and
Mm-hmm.
he started
Mm-hmm.
explaining, he said we chose to do
Mm-hmm.
that so that anybody that is actually going to be leaving our company,
Mm-hmm.
we could give you a package that looked like this.
Mm-hmm.
And as he was talking about it, and you could feel like his throat was
Mm-hmm.
catching himself and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
When it finished, because I happened to be there sitting in one of the
Mm-hmm.
offices, because we knew there were some situations
Mm-hmm.
that could unfold. And several of the people, I watched people walk by and I saw them like wiping their eyes. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought, well, I hope Ray did the right thing. So
Yeah.
later on, everybody said, we used to respect him. We now love him. We
Right.
now love him. We now understand him. And as the business, because it's an ebb and flow kind of thing, as the business started growing, they were able to, anybody that they went after that they wanted to bring back, 90% of them said absolutely yes.
Right. Right.
Because basically he had a culture that he actually embraced all sides of himself and understood where they were going, what was needed.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And obviously there are times where the decision has to be made, right? We have to put away the warm, fuzzy feelings and all of those. And I think that's where we see people who are very right brain have issues also, because they can't make that decision. And for whatever reason, they don't want to hurt people. They haven't analyzed it, or they don't want to analyze it. You put a spreadsheet in front of some people and they're like, no. But it has to be that combination. And so, it's like that gentleman said, teach me to do that. We can't always do that. And so the important thing is to build that team around you, right?
Absolutely. So I strongly encourage people to hire for cognitive diverse people within their group. So there's a couple of things that I recommend when you're trying to get to that place. First one potentially is put people together in projects that think differently about the business. So they're, if you will, forced to collaborate and have conversations and be exposed to the different way people think. When designing somebody's career path, please choose for them different roles so that, and obviously, if the person is meant to be in a C-level role, they will have had a chance to operate in all the different sections of the business, or different ways where different thinking applies, and therefore they'll be more successful and more understanding, if you will, at the top. Now, there are some things, just as an FYI, that one can do to try to grow a little bit of the synapse.
Right. Just being aware is one of the big, right? Knowing, okay, I'm this or that.
There's specific things I'm going to share with you. So something that I learned was that Baroque music, Vivaldi and Bach, have a particular cadence that when played in the background, if you're actually basically the reason I studied this was a couple of my clients had children that were having challenges at school.
Okay.
Either they were, really good with English, but bad in math, or really good in math, bad in English. And I said, well, why don't you play a little bit of Baroque music in the background when they're working on their homework? What it does is it activates both sides of the brain and see what happens. And they were like, oh my God, it's so wonderful. And it's, again, something that you can do. Now, there's something you can do physically, which is when you're walking, when your right foot goes out, have your left hand go in front of you. So,
so that you're forcing your body to.
You may look militarily kind of thing, but it is, if you will, creating that particular dynamic. So there's things like that you can do that takes you to another place. The last one, because back to, if you're really good on the right brain side, you're accessing your intuition more often. So I'll say, when you're working on a project or you're working on something that's not just basic kind of thing, making a list, write down 10 items, turn it upside down so you cannot read them now. Spend less than 15 seconds on identifying what number you're going to give to each one of those, and then turn it around. And you may find yourself surprised that it may be in a different order than what you'd envisioned, but based on the information that you're going to be getting in the future, it's the exact right order for you to follow. So there is something about the way our right brain and our intuition works that creates context for us that's a time saver. So those are just a couple of different tips that people might apply. Say, how does my right brain work?
Right.
How does my left brain work?
And it's not like you're going to make the mathematician be an artist, right? But you can open them up to what are those concepts, and especially with music and art. Music in particular, I mean, that's math, and when people start realizing that, then they're like, oh, okay. Maybe that's why playing Baroque music is something is, that's because it's music, but it's math and all of those. But yeah, why did Monet do this? Why is that color pattern? So it's not, oh, because it felt good. Now that might be why he did it, right? But somebody else is going to go because that blue shading went very well with the yellow. And so they're combining all of that to be able to do that.
Thank you for bringing that up. It is true about that. People that are very good in science tend to also really be good musicians because they understand the whole cadence and all of that. I think the part that we don't often approach or understand is that in our own body organically is integrated. So when people who do research studies about this, there's a woman that wrote a book called Molecules of Emotion, and she was actually working on trying to find a cure for AIDS and things like that, worked at the NIH and all of that. What she basically discovered when doing her work was that the endocrine, the immune, and the brain were all connected. So on an unconscious level, we're already designed to have that integration happen.
Right.
But why not on a conscious level when we're choosing to work on things? And one of the areas that I find interesting that's, again, simple for us to pursue is how curious are you? If you were going to measure your curiosity.
Right. Yeah, you mentioned in your book, you were the little girl that said, why? Why? Yeah, and that was me too.
Exactly. I was one of the organizations I worked with was a bank, and I was working in the wealth management side of the house. And there was this particular leader who was being groomed to go higher. And he was putting together his team, and he came in and was disrupting some things. And so the CEO said, "Oh, Michael's too disruptive." Blah, blah. And I said, well, let's understand if there's a method to his
right.
madness.
Yeah.
Why
is he doing that?
What's going on there? And what he was trying to get across to his team was, if you're actually going to be working with owners and business leaders, you need to be curious about their business.
Right.
To be curious about their why. Because you cannot help them. You can't give them any kind of good financial trusted advisor kind of information if you haven't reached and connected to that. And so he would put together special different workshops for them to actually examine different concepts.
Oh, I love it.
And one of the things that I will say is, because he did, there was people on his team that were receptive to cryptocurrency earlier. So they identified a trend. They spent time trying to understand it, see how did that fit into the overall pattern of what it was that the portfolio that they were managing was going to be all about. So it's yes, curiosity may have killed the cat, but for us, it's essential for opening up all our brains.
It is, yeah, and it does, it comes back to the 3-year-old who's saying why, because they're exploring their world. And how many times have we asked a business owner or somebody, why do you do it this way? And their response is, because that's the way we've always done it.
Yes.
That's the worst response anybody could give, but that is one of the most frequent ones. And sometimes those are great. I mean, that might be the best way to do it, but it also might be that there are so many ways that it could be improved upon, but because they're so caught up in that this is the way we've always done it, that nobody realizes, yeah, but what if we did blue as opposed to green, or whatever it is, and just kind of went off in a different direction.
I think one of the consultants in the industry that I read several of his books, the thing that caught me was that he said, I would sit in a meeting with a CEO who'd been running the company for 10 years, or they might have been the founder. And they would basically say, I don't even know what I need to work with you, because I've already made, 15%.
Yeah, it's going
year.
well.
Yeah. And he looked at it and he said, well, if you're happy with 15%, that's okay. How do you know that it couldn't have been 50%? And it was like, oh,
right.
It could have been that much bigger. And so I think that's a question that I think today we do ask ourselves a little bit more. And we also, I think that the changes we're experiencing right now are a little unprecedented. Globally and individually, many things are very, very different. So you're doing somebody a favor by helping them engage their full brain to arrive at being better at whatever they're choosing to do.
Right. So, and I don't know why I just thought of this. Maybe it's, people talk about work-life balance. And I'm like, no, there's no such thing. And so what I was thinking is it's probably not 50% left brain, 50% right brain. That's going to change with the situation.
Well, there's no formula that I say every time do this.
Right, because we hear about the Paredes 80-20, right?
Yeah.
No.
So I would say that this started back in 2008 for me. I was working with a CEO had reached out to me. Actually, he and I were both working with Toyota. And he said, I'm wondering if you have any experience working with somebody in my situation. I said, well, what's your situation? He said, so basically, I came into this company about a year and a half ago, and I was hired and the company's run by angel investors. And the company's been around for 7 years. And the angel investors have come to me and said they want their money back in 2 years. And
that was Bob, right? Was that Bob or was that John?
That was Bob. That was Bob. And so when I sat there and I said, okay, so we designed several workshops. And the key part of it was, I said, I want us to get to different scenarios. I want them to get good at scenario planning because we're living in very unusual times. At that time, we had the financial crisis going on. And so I think that in terms of how much right brain, how much left brain, getting people to understand that there's 3 or 4 different scenarios that could unfold for where the direction things outside, inside, and then what percentages do we give to every one of those scenarios? Because there was times as on that route to finally being able to be acquired that they were able to say, we're now moving from scenario 2 to scenario 1. And they had, if you will, it's like they had the formula. They knew what to do. Right. So it's about the ability to be able to, if you will, get to a place where you can pivot, you can make a decision in understanding what's next without panicking. Right. That panicking is what's going to slow you down.
Right. And of course, we saw that everywhere in 2020, right? And that was one of those things because so many people, they went to work on Friday, they went in to work on Friday, and on Monday they were home, and companies, businesses, schools, everything were shut down. And I have to laugh. Remember, they told us 2 weeks. Just give me 2 weeks.
2 weeks is
and we all went, no. If it's because my thought was, if it's serious enough, we're shutting all of this down. It's going to take more than 2 weeks to turn it around. Because if it was not, then why were we even messing with it? But, and then when it went into months and in some cases, forever, it was one of those situations where it was so interesting to see who could adapt and make those changes. One of my favorites was out in this direction. It was a distillery, right? Who, they made whiskey and, and they, now granted, a lot of people were drinking during this time, right?
Oh, yeah. And watching and binge watching.
Yeah. And so, but they changed their process around to be making hand sanitizer. And, and because they saw the need, they had the equipment, and they even packaged it in the whiskey bottles, and obviously stuck a different label on it and all that good stuff. But it was just something. And then, they've gone back to whiskey, we're not using hand sanitizer by the gallons anymore, but they immediately pivoted. And, and I wonder, what do you suppose that conversation was like? Can you imagine somebody going in and saying, we're not making whiskey, we're going to make hand sanitizer?
Now, I would venture to say that if they were able to pivot that quickly, there were probably at least a couple of situations potential situations going on there. The first step is obviously they had a leader at the very top, right? Who's innovative and visionary. The second thing is he had either a trusted team or a group of people that he could run the idea by.
Right. And they wouldn't go,
that's
you are an idiot.
yeah, you're crazy, this
Mhm.
won't work or anything like that. And I think the other part is they probably had an understanding of what created a return
Mhm.
now.
Right.
I think when I think the advantage of being in the technology industry was that things were changing so quickly
Mhm.
that, like, for instance, Intel,
Mhm.
they had to come out with a new chip every 6 months.
Mhm. Right.
And therefore, they recognized that the maximum return to optimize
Mhm.
for a chip at a time was
Mhm.
X, Y.
Mhm.
So it potentially in the whiskey business, they're used to X amount of
Mhm.
profitability.
Mhm.
And now, because people won't be able to access or whatever,
Mhm.
they go and get a return that was
Mhm.
3, 4 times, but the
Mhm.
turnaround was faster.
Right.
So
Mhm.
they had a formula that
Mhm.
they all could
Mhm.
follow, and obviously they were following somebody that
Right.
wasn't.
Mhm.
Oh, that's great. I love that story.
Yeah,
I
and
love that
I'm gonna
story.
have to look it back up again just to see, because it was, and I
Yeah,
don't think it was Jack Daniels, but it was somebody along the lines of, that large.
yeah, yeah.
But and that's where we saw the companies fail, right? Where they said, no, we have done business this way, and we're going to continue to do business this way. And I laugh that the poor micromanagers of the world, their little heads just exploded, because the people that they used to reach out and touch, they couldn't do that. And I mean, I had people tell me, well, I need to know exactly what they're doing 100% of the time. And I said, did you know that when they were in the office? And they would either say yes or no. And if they said no, I said, well, were they still a good employee? Well, yes. I said, so I don't see what the problem is. You either trust them or you don't. And that was what it came down to. And it definitely was something that I think we saw a lot of innovation. And unfortunately, we saw companies fail,
Yeah.
but more than likely they were headed down that road anyway, right? So they were the type of company that was, Blockbuster, not seeing that Netflix was going, hello, or all of the companies that are like that. So they probably, they shortened that life cycle. But yeah, it was, and I think what's interesting is we still see that innovation, well, what if we do this, or what if we do that? It's, to me, it's just very interesting. And I'm not in the business environment, it's not like I'm in an office, but it is very interesting just to see how in so many cases people embrace that. They went, this is really pretty cool.
One of the stories I love is there's a restaurant chain. It's not large, it's
Mm-hmm.
local, and they primarily do Mediterranean food. So they
Mm-hmm.
do a lot of shish kebabs.
Mm-hmm.
And when COVID happened, they had to go 100% to takeout
Right, because you could
because
not go in and sit.
you couldn't go and sit down.
Mm-hmm.
And so now, obviously, many years later, I was at the restaurant the other
Mm-hmm.
day, and I'm watching all the takeout orders
Mm-hmm.
being,
Mm-hmm.
lined up,
Mm-hmm.
and I see the different drivers come in to catch
Mm-hmm.
anything. And so the owner was there, and I said, "What percentage of your business
Mm-hmm.
today are you still doing takeout?" He said,
Mm-hmm.
"It's the bulk of our business." He says,
Wow.
"It's
Mm-hmm.
75%." He said, "Now, what that
Mm-hmm.
does is it has allowed us to
Mm-hmm.
make the space different in the
Mm-hmm.
restaurant."
Right.
And he said, now, like, he says, like, Mother's Day for us used to be
Mm-hmm.
like crazy. He
Mm-hmm.
said, and now we have it down to a formula.
Mm-hmm.
He says, so I'm actually way more profitable now.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But it was like they
Mm-hmm.
switched
Mm-hmm.
it. People knew that it was an
Mm-hmm.
important, it was something that was like security. We
Mm-hmm.
like that food, whatever. Everybody decided to go for that.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, just the number of food delivery and all of those, that's been just very interesting. I love it when I travel, because a lot of times I travel alone, and I'm not going to go to a restaurant, but I can
Yeah,
have it delivered.
absolutely.
And I just love that, because then I get to have, and I try to not pick, Chili's, Applebee's. I try and pick, like a
A
local
local
type
one.
of
Yeah,
restaurant. Yep.
absolutely. Yeah.
And that's just always so enjoyable. But it was so interesting to watch those pivots that
Mhm.
people had to do, and some of them completely changed what they were doing. And I love that, because again, it meant that they had that leadership that
Mhm.
went, okay, we can do this.
Mhm.
And so that was what was so fun about it.
Mhm. One of the things to think about, when you talked about the fact that we were all working, meeting in person, and then we
Mm-hmm.
suddenly were shut down. I actually was working with an executive at Cedars-Sinai Hospital. I had actually been there that Thursday
Oh,
and had asked her, I've been hearing this thing about this,
yeah, the
coronavirus.
super bug.
Yeah. And so I said, do you think that's going to be affecting us? Will they change the protocol here at the hospital? And she said, no, I don't think so. And then Monday, everything changed. And needless to say, I talked to her boss, talked about how they were going to shift things. And it was interesting because even people who, if you will, would become essential workers during that time were also caught not knowing what was going to change.
Right.
And because they were able to make the changes, the first thing that her boss said to me was, I'm so glad you've been working with her because you have already conditioned her to raise her curiosity meter.
To ask why.
Exactly. So it was really interesting because now they realize they're going to need to have people on different committees in the hospital to make the right call based on whatever the situation was.
Right. I love it. Well, oh my gosh, Sonia, we are almost at the time. I promised this, I teased this at the very start. Your company is SEMA Executive Development. Why the name?
So SEMA, I'm originally from Bogota, Colombia, and SEMA means peak.
Right.
And when I first started my business, I was looking to get peak executive development, for my business, and it was already taken. And I was so disappointed, and I was thinking about it, and I called my sister, and she says, well, we are Hispanic.
Right. So why not SEMA?
So the only thing I will tell you is that SEMA is also an organization that is, and I don't even know everything that it stands for, that is in the financial industry. So for the first couple of years, I
got a little mixed up.
I would get invited to all these, and vendors would want to sell me, and I was like, no, I'm not in that industry.
Right. I love it. I love it. Well, tell us more about SEMA Executive Development. How do they find you, and what are the services that you provide?
Okay, so I have a website. I shortened it so that people could type it up easily. It's CIMAED, so www.cima.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, Sonia Jeantet, SONIAJEANTET. When you go to my site, you'll be able to actually get on. If you want to have like a chemistry meeting, let's get to know you kind of meeting, that's obviously always pro bono. And that's 30 minutes. There's a Calendly link there. You can absolutely go there. And then if you want to or learn more about, integrative leadership, I do have a book. It's sold on Amazon. It's sold, Barnes and Nobles, anywhere. I did record an audio version of it. So there is an audio version of it. It's obviously available on Kindle. I have asked my publisher to make it available for the month of May at 99 cents. So they can actually go there and get it for that. And I provide coaching, consulting, and facilitation in terms of actual services with clients. And then I'm also a speaker. I speak to conferences, and I primarily speak on the power of cognitive diversity, because I really do think that the more that people embrace that, the faster we can all get on with it. I perceive that there's new technologies down the road. I think there's going to be new energy systems. And so we need to be able to figure out how we're all going to work together well in the future. So that's how you can find me, and those are the things that I talk about.
I love it. I love it. Well, this has been so much fun, and we will definitely have you on again, because this is something that is continually evolving, right?
Yes. Absolutely.
But until then, do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
Yes. So my final thought is, if you could raise your curiosity meter by 10% over the course of this year, what kinds of opportunities will you have in 2025 that causes you to change the game?
I love it. I love it. I am Deb Creer. I've been having so much fun chatting with Sonia Jeantet, the founder of SEMA Executive Development. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Thank you so much, Deb.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.